Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
Michael, I was going to say welcome to the show, but welcome back for your third appearance on the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm super excited to be talking SDR follow-ups today. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Third time is, I would say, is a charm, but the other two were charms too. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think the first one where we talked about the first one was emailing, right? And like how to write cold email and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and personalize. And I think that's one of our top most downloaded. Definitely top 10, might be higher, most downloaded episodes. So,
wow.
Quite the honor.
It was a really fun conversation. That was like smack dab COVID, had my buzz haircut, all of that. So it was a great conversation.
Yeah. And it added so much context. And now I appreciate every time somebody from Chili Piper reaches out to me and I'm like, you're running Michael's playbook. This is so cool. And they're genuinely the best cold emails that I receive. They're thoughtful, they're funny, they're intelligent. Yeah. And I'm just not going to buy Chili Piper. And it's nothing against Chili Piper. It's just like we don't have a good use case for it in our team. So
yeah,
every time they reach out.
They do a really good, they do a really good job. I think one of the things that we tried to do was like we were remote in our remote company, and so one of the things early on was like I want people to like give feedback on each other's like messaging, and like sometimes when I worked at organizations, like one person would write all the emails and then everyone would just be forced to use all of that. It was like a very like centralized approach, and quite frankly, just also like not as effective. And there's this, kind of view that out there, like, SDRs just need to only do kind of whatever that centralized like theory is, or execute upon that one cadence like all the time, which I get like manager's position there, but I kind of like wanted to flip that a little bit. And I was like, I kind of feel like, leveraging people's like creativity, giving each other feedback, understanding like why something is the way it is, because, it's not just like cadences, I can hire a VA to help me with like cadences, but there's and just executing on like mass email sending, right? But that's not ultimately what an SDR does, is not loading up a bunch of mass emails and then you can virtually teach anyone to do that. We wanted to build the skills in like a much deeper way to fully understand the role start to finish. And a big emphasis there was like peer-to-peer learning, feedback. How do you handle email replies? How do you personalize and customize those emails? How do you leverage, when everybody goes left, you go right? There's just so much more like depth there where you can take it. And I think that so there's a new director of SDR over at Chili Piper, and I think he started like maybe end of 2019, if I had to guess. And he's excellent. His name is Joey. Really, really fast learner, great, attitude. And I know he's killing it with the SDRs over there, and they're doing a really good job. So super proud of the work that we did, and glad to hear that other people can appreciate it as well.
Right on. The one, I think one of my favorites, the most like interesting style, it's not a style, I don't know, it's not a template, I'm trying to find the right word for it, tactic maybe, is instead of like reaching out and being like, okay, here's Chili Piper's value, like we know that what Chili Piper is. I will trade you my best, I can't remember what kind of recipe it was, Brazilian something recipe for 30 minutes of your time. and like we'll take some time and I'll talk you through the recipe, and then I'll talk to you about chili piper. And I'm like, this is genius. And I want that recipe, but also I don't want to waste your time because it's not something that we're gonna buy. And I'm like, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, like, God forbid we have fun doing our jobs, especially like, people always talk about pattern breaking in the SDR role, I think that's a really, yeah, I'll have to see who did that. I don't know who did that email, but it sounds really, really creative. And I also want that, want that recipe. But yeah, I mean, I think that the usual like formula, like value prop, another value prop, 15-minute CTA, that very formulaic almost approach that we all get in our email inboxes. When you start to disrupt that a little bit in just these little ways, you can really stand out.
Totally. I think her name was it was either Tuani or Nothando. I can't remember which one it was. There's a couple of threads. South African Malda pudding recipe.
Wow.
I was like, dang, Nothando, please send me that recipe. So if you're listening, great job. Sorry.
Yeah, let's see if we can get you that recipe.
So here's how it segues into what we're talking about today. She sent me this amazing email, and then didn't follow up. And she did send a bunch of other follow-ups, and this was kind of like maybe her Hail Mary, like instead of like, oh, are you trapped in your office and there's a crocodile or whatever that one used to be, that I'm so glad has been retired and doesn't come back anymore.
Oh gosh, yeah, the tigers and the yeah.
She sent me a great email and then she didn't follow up, and I'm like, okay, well, she didn't follow up again, and that was October. So like maybe she's off my account, maybe I got recycled, because it's been about 90 days as of tomorrow.
Did you say it wasn't a good fit?
I didn't reply. I didn't reply to her.
Okay.
But I did reply to an earlier email in September. And I thought I did reply to this one. Maybe I replied over email because she was obviously multi-threading. So now that I'm not going to look my email because I'll lose it. But I'm pretty confident I replied to her over email. So
okay.
But today we're talking about follow-up. We're talking about follow-up for specifically SDRs. We're going to start with a little bit of the theory side and some best practices around, what is Michael's perspective on how, when, where, and why you should follow up with your cold prospects and warm prospects. I've got a little take on some 4 outbound funnels that everybody needs to pay attention to. And then we're going to dig in deep into like tactical, like what does really good SDR follow-up look like and where does it start? So with that being said, let's talk about your theory, your feelings, your thoughts on, when you're teaching an SDR, how to follow up and why to follow up. Where do you start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important topics in sales. I think when I was coming up kind of through the ranks, one of the things that stood out to me is like follow-ups was one of those topics that everyone said you had to do. And I heard like statistics around it, but the how part I felt like was like always missing. And so it was like, oh, follow-ups are these important things that you need to do. And, 18 touches on a cadence or like whatever. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But like, help me actually like show me how to actually do that, in what circumstances, like what needs to be done. I can remember going way back to like when I was first, setting opportunities. We didn't even call it an SDR. We called it lead gen. And I would just go through yeah, right. We didn't call it SDR. And then I would go through the notes, right? And there's different types of sales, right? Like there's more maybe transactional, maybe there's enterprise, maybe there's mid-market. Like everyone's selling a different product to a different segment than someone else. So you have to take those things into consideration. In this particular instance, I was selling to accountants. So it was a little bit more transactional. And so you had like lots of gatekeepers, especially around like tax season or even like anytime really. And so I would look at like the call notes, right? If I was cold calling, we can talk about email as well, but focusing on that one channel. And I would always like notice there was like a lack of information and like a lack of like really driving enough effort. And I kind of tucked that away and I said, okay, you know, I cold call, I get a piece of information from the receptionist that was not in the notes of the 20 other people that cold call this, right? And so I say, I learned the influencer's name or the decision maker's name. Like, we were really big on this type of language back then. And I write it down. So simple, but like that little piece of work. Then I follow up. I ask for the person. I ask again. I ask again. And so I tell this story because it opened up my mind to like, what does this follow up mean and why is it important to me? And eventually I had done so much work figuring out many more details than just like their name and things like that. But you know, when they would be in the office, why maybe they haven't moved forward with us before, and things like that. And I would try to correct whatever that reason was. And then eventually I got to the place where there were days where I'd book a large amount of opportunities, and the majority of them would come from my follow-ups. And so this was like a precursor to how we at Chili Piper, that many years later would end up like, I worked with the CEO to come up with a lot of the sales like training. He was like really into it. I was really into it. And so we would kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And one of the things that we taught to the team was this idea of like a micro theory. And a micro theory is applied to why you reach out to someone originally, but also for why you don't, or excuse me, why you do a follow-up. So for example, in that scenario where 20 people called, and it essentially had like no notes other than like you had called a bunch of times, maybe it's something as simple as like getting that person's name, you know, correcting any misinformation you did have, and really like honestly grabbing this account and driving it to as far as you can possibly go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the deal right now, but like try to take it as far as you can. And sometimes that means getting more information than other people have gotten before. And sometimes that is your win. That's the accomplishment, is the progression piece. I think like a lot of times when I get prospected, it feels like ready to buy it. I'm like, no, as a buyer, there's so many other things that need to happen before I buy. Right. And so it's okay to have these like micro little wins. And then, you know, maybe you get the bulk of your opportunities from follow-ups because you really put the work in. You know, I'm sort of in building a company right now. I'm going through all this all over again. And the companies that are working with me now are the people that I started conversations with a long time ago, even on a prospecting level, not even on a deal acceleration level. So it is absolutely essential to nail this follow-up skill in a much more specific and dynamic way than your peers are, right? To your point about being prospected by an SDR, if it's just like given up upon, oh, I did my 25-step cadence with really, you know, no thoughts or anything behind it, you know, it's going to be really hard to get like sustainable results. And we can talk about the strategies around multi-threading and multi-channel and things like that as well. But you have to start at the highest level, which is like, what is the thing that was not done previously that you're going to do differently, and you're going to correct that. A lot of times it stems from acquiring proper information to gradually, you know, progress the deal. And it's kind of like a snowball effect. Maybe you start, you know, slow and you can allow it to accelerate. People are also at different points in their buyer journey. In sales, where we're often taught, what's the sales process? You know, get people to go down your sales process. If you're not aware of your buyer's journey and where they are in their buying process, and that concept isn't clear to you in 2023, it becomes really hard, you know, for you to build those sales skills.
Totally. I wanted to shine a light on something that I think you said, that I don't think maybe we can just spend a little bit more time talking about the thought process there. You mentioned that you were making, every time you follow up, you're taking notes, and you're thinking through, okay, what do I do next? This seems like I had two thoughts. I was like, one, this is the opposite of how I used to prospect when I was younger. I was in mindless cog in a machine mode, and I'm just crushing my tasks. I don't want to do the cold calls, but I'm doing them because I know they're good for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just going through and I'm like, I hit my call task, I move on to the next one. I hit my call
Yeah.
task. It
Uh-huh.
sounds like what you're doing is like a small research step so that every time you hit a call task or a follow-up task, you are building that account somehow. Can you elaborate on what you're doing there?
Yeah, this was absolutely essential. And when I became a closer, I kept this strategy with me, and it's what enabled me to rise above everyone else and closing capacity as well, because I get all these marketing and SDR leads. I would close those, and then, oh, by the way, I have this really efficient system that I can walk away from and not take that stress with me at home. I can come back to it, and guess what? That system is still there at work. And until I built that system, sales was stressful to me. And once I put that system in place, it felt much more sustainable. And that was massive for me as a closer as well. And it was absolutely instrumental to me, like taking home those, $20,000 commission checks and things like that. It started with a follow-up. So if you kind of like think, I kind of think of like follow-ups as my own way to warm up my leads, right? Like if everything is cold to you today, like you can maybe your initial outreach, you can take something that is cold, and the whole idea with it is you want to do this warm up process to it, right? It is really hard to just cold call a bunch of things. And if you hope that everyone converts on your cold call without any sort of follow-up, it's going to be really hard. And I noticed that's what everyone was doing not everyone, but most of the people on the sales floor were doing. And so I was saying, like, how do I get out of this cold call and try to make them warmer, right? And so even like I've called somebody so many times where she knew my name, and we would joke about it. And I said, what do I need to do to talk to the accountant? Maybe I was calling legal a different day. And so, also just like learning the industry, right? Like a lot of times we learn our product and try to fit everyone into that. But when you learn the landscape and lingo, this helps with your follow-up as well, right? Their schedules, when they're really busy, like what their preferences are. That level of understanding helps you as well. So the notes were that you asked me about were my way to keep it warm and tell my future self what to do in a very specific and contextual way. So if you think about like the book Atomic Habits, I think every SDR should read that because it talks about the system creation as well. There's a part of the book where it's like, if you're trying to work out, you can't just say, oh, I want to work out more. You're much more likely to follow through with it if you're like, well, where am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? Who am I going to do it with? Like, that level of specificity. But when we take our notes and do our follow-ups, a lot of times people don't do that. Like for me, when I'm prospecting, I know there's a lot of debate around this, but like inbox zero, I have to have that, because if I don't do inbox zero, things fall through the cracks and they go missing. So I need my folders organized and I clear it out at the end of every single day. And if I don't do that, I just can't, it doesn't fit my system, and I need that system to help me be productive. And really what I'm trying to do is warm up my leads through, or my accounts or my contacts through my diligent follow-up process. And a huge part of that is note-taking, not just telling my future self what to do, but also like what to say, like, hey, this is what we spoke about. And it doesn't have to be anything longer, but when you put more work in like that, it does pay off, and it pays off significantly, right? There's people I'm prospecting right now that I had no idea. They had no idea who I was a year ago, right? Or maybe even less than that, right? But I'm constantly in this like follow-up. And a follow-up, by the way, sometimes we think follow-up is always in ask mode, ready to buy, 15-minute call, give me a demo. Like everyone is saying those things. You don't always have to follow up with an ask. And in fact, you shouldn't. So if you always have an ask for someone, then you're just another salesperson to them, right? You have to figure out how to get in this area of warmth, and follow-ups are an excellent way to do that.
And relevance too. The number one thing that drives me crazy about SDR emails is when they're like, hey, book a meeting here. Let's get 30 minutes and I'll do a demo. I'm like, I don't want to see a demo. I don't even know if it's the right thing for me. Like, you've given me nothing to go on. You copy pasted 3 generic bullet points about your product, but I haven't decided to take this meeting yet.
Exactly. And to that point, like maybe the goal is a little too like far down the process. Maybe what we need is to slow it down. Maybe the goal isn't, hey, Michael, hey, Collin, like let's book. Maybe the goal is let's engage, right? And once you engage someone and that is your goal, the side effect of that is you are much more likely to get them to book a meeting than if you're just meeting, 15-minute CTA everywhere. So I think if we move in this direction of getting people engaging with us, then when they are in market, they choose us. I really do think it helps. It helps people. I think generally speaking, my sales experiences haven't been the best, but when I think of a product that I've recently bought, someone followed up with me really kindly, super diligently. They were an expert at what they said. It wasn't the right time, but then I ended up getting a referral to this company. Instead of going inbound and being reassigned to someone, I had that person's name in my inbox. I reached out with her, and when I was ready, I closed the deal in it was like less than a couple of days. It's almost a year I've been a customer of this company. We're very tightly wound. They really helped me out with something that I needed. And that's an example of like a better story, like where they did their diligent follow-up in a very like professional, memorable way. And then some other channel triggered me to think about this company. Like in this case, it was kind of a referral, like, oh, why don't you go check them out? And then I just emailed her back and said, I need this now. And I had forgotten about them, but someone reminded me, and then I moved forward, and it was a closed-won opportunity. And so, yeah, I think we need to think about the buyer side of it as well.
And 100%. And I think the thing that new SDRs don't understand right away is the way you open a conversation is not the way you're going to close the conversation or book the meeting. So you can start by talking about vegetables, and you can end by booking a meeting to talk about software. Like that is a thing that is I think an underrated or underappreciated idea in sales development, that you do not have to open by asking for a meeting. I understand your job is to book meetings, but don't start the conversation with, hey, can I book a meeting?
And I think some of that pressure comes from, their managers. I don't think that a lot of this is, or all of this is on the SDR themselves. I think the advice I would say is if you can figure out how to slow this down and detach from that end result a little bit, it will help you. And then, but on that same token though, I'm thinking back to when I worked at a company, it's not around anymore, called Snack Nation. And I had this one SDR, her name is Marianne, and I
Sorry, Snack Nation?
Snack Nation, yeah.
Yeah. Who is your SDR? There was a VP of sales that was there.
Kevin Dorsey.
Love Kevin.
Yeah. Kevin's great.
Did you roll up to Kevin?
I did. Yeah. Kevin was
my,
see, we always learn something about each other.
he was guest number 20 or 25
on
the podcast.
Early days.
Yeah, totally. As we were on the show, somebody closed a deal and they were all like ringing the gong or the bell or whatever it was.
Oh, wow. Was that while he was at Snack Nation?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like
it's even before my time there.
Yeah. I think Humankind was like a customer of the startup I had started called Carb.io, which was the prospecting tool. And so Humankind used it. And then we had Kevin on the podcast, and then I can't remember.
And we also used Carb.io at another startup I was at in LA.
Right on. Yeah. It's sad. I don't want to talk about it. I had dreams of I literally had a dream of rebuilding Carb, just the front end part of it the other day.
Yeah. Maybe you should. Maybe it's, you never know, right?
So you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance. And you can always help advise me, because we always need help over here at Calypso. We're in the product we're building. So you can always advise me.
Dude, happy to help. Before we move on to getting into the tactical stuff, the thing you mentioned about telling your future self what to do. I love this. I implemented this for myself as an AE. When I was an AE, Actually, when I was a founder, like founder-led selling, so founder AE here at PR,
Yeah.
because there were so many things on the go. I was struggling to get organized. I read a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, it was basically you decide on what the next step is and when you're going to take that next step. And then you go in every day, you start at the top and you just work your way down. And I built this into my Salesforce opportunity object and a Salesforce view that one of our AEs is still, all of our AEs are still using it. And you just sort by like, okay, when's the next step date? Cool. I'm going to go do that thing. And the reason why this is so valuable is it saves you a ton of time because you don't have to, um, there's a, there's switching costs there's
Mm-hmm.
context
Mm-hmm.
switching
Yep.
in your brain. It takes you time to, like, when we started this podcast, it took me 5 minutes to reload all of the context back into my brain.
Exactly.
And when you're doing high volume prospecting follow-up, you have to reload the context of that account. You got to remember all this stuff. That takes a lot of time.
Yep.
So if you already have it loaded and you've just done that follow-up, writing down, okay, this is when I'm going to follow up next. This is precisely the angle I'm going to take or what I'm going to do, or here's 3 bullets for me so that I can quickly execute on this, I think is one of the smartest things you can do as an SDR.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I used to like to do was I was all about trying to create a system, and I think sometimes in sales we get obsessed with like a process, right? To me, like a process is more like intellectual, whereas like a system is like more like operational. And so I was like, I've always been really obsessed with like a system because I can walk away from it. It will still produce results for me. And so one of those elements of my system, in addition to the note taking, was you're talking about context switching, was at the beginning of each day, especially on Mondays. Mondays were like my jam when I was an SDR. We would go after those follow-ups first, right? And my context is following up with everyone first. And then I would do my cold calls and cold emails like after that. And the goal of those was the same thing, to add them to that follow-up bucket. And then now I'm doing that like every single day and I'm just adding it. But I would do follow-ups first, then I would do cold. And honestly, I think that strategy works all the way up to today. I'm prospecting right now, founder-led sales. Like, you learn things that change and you adapt to, sales is not the same as when I was a SDR a million years ago. But there are elements and threads that are still very similar and that are constants, and you should retain that if that's working for you. One of those is this same system of follow-ups, especially if they're like contextual, right? Another one is like, and we can get into multi-threading, but like maybe the other day I had spoken to someone at a company and I used that fact to intro myself to another one that then I did this whole follow-up process with all over again. And now I have 2 people. We could talk, about the multi-threading piece separately, but when you really pay attention to these details and create this system that you are so confident in that you can walk away from and forget about, you just enter a totally different playing field as everyone on your team. And it becomes almost everyone comes to you and is like, what are you doing differently? And that's the place that you want to get to.
100%. I think good systems, strong habits can make an average salesperson like myself, like really above average. And I don't say that to be self-deprecating. Looking back at like my selling experience pre-PR, I had some big wins, but I was probably pretty average. If I was going up against like real professionals, like AEs that have been selling all the way through.
Yeah.
But I just had really good habits and I never gave up on anything.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I kind of carried with me, and I'm going to make up a stat. Let's pretend it's wrong, or it's wrong, but it's directionally correct. 5% of buyers are 5% of the people that you prospect out to that you book a meeting with are going to be in a position to buy now, or at least enter your pipeline right now. That means that 19 out of 20 people you talk to aren't ready to buy right now. The thing that I did a little bit differently to keep myself super organized. So in addition to this sort of planning what to do next, I had 4 different versions of what to do next, whether I was prospecting or whether I was closing. And the 4 kind of outbound funnels that I managed to maintain were the interested now, interested but not ready, not interested, and then long-term kind of deal follow-up. And so the first three, so the first one, interested now, was a very tight follow-up sequence where I'm making sure I'm staying on top of this. If we go 2 days without talking, I'm going to give them a call again, right? These are the people that have replied positively to an email. And now I'm just making sure, like, I know I got one on the hook. I'm going to work this pretty manually. And I would have a sequence or a cadence or a process in Salesforce to make sure that this always bubbles to the top of my to-do list. That interested but not ready. These are people that kind of were like a neutral reply, and they're like, hey, it's a good fit, but it's not a good fit right now. The goal here would be understand why not now. And so I would have a very specific cadence around, or sequence that would, of messaging that was geared around, okay, the next step is understand why not now. Let's send them that cadence. And the third one, and so that one was pretty, was a little bit more automated than the third one was not interested. So they're not interested. You're trying to find out either why they're not interested. And if you can't get any response there, then it was okay, if I believe this is the right account, just the wrong person. Now let's go into either top down, depending on the level of account I'm working, either a top down CEO referral down, or a bottoms up, go down to their subordinate. And I would add these people into different sequences. And then I would build up to say, okay, well, I believe this is the right account. My hypothesis says this account should be a good fit. So let's go. Maybe my assumptions about my persona were incorrect. And so that was the kind of not interested. And then the long-term follow-up, which was basically it was 100% manual with obviously reminders and things, where I was working my opportunities that I had lost. And I was just staying in touch with every op that we lose. I would have closed lost reasons. And I would have a different sub follow-up type and sequence for those closed lost reasons. So if it was like in a contract, I'd make sure I know when the next contract renewal date was. If it was, not interested because they had a competitive tool, I had pressure points for like, okay, well, I know this tool is this way. And so those are the kind of four. Without going into, I could talk forever about all these different sequences, and it's really fun. But I think the takeaway for anybody listening is you want to take into consideration that all follow-up is not the same follow-up. Not all follow-up should be 100% manual. Not all follow-up should be 100% automated. And there are grades in between. And so those are my 4 kind of outbound funnels: interested now, interested not ready, not interested, long-term follow-up, like manual nurture. Those worked for me. There's probably different for you. The piece here is when you have these funnels set up, the follow-up process is a system, it's on rails, and you know exactly what to do. And it's very easy when you get off the phone. They say, oh, well, yeah, I'm working with a competitor. Great. I'm going to put you in long-term nurture competitor sequence. And then I'm going to work that. And I've got my messaging, and I've got my scripting, and I've got my plans already worked out.
Yeah, exactly. I love everything that you said. I particularly really like the attention to detail of that, because you again are coming up with a theory of like which bucket are they in, and really paying attention to those details that really inform your approach to the account. And then again, like, this is an excellent system for you to be able to rely on. And that doesn't mean that you don't make tweaks to your system or improve it or figure out little ways to make adjustments here or there, but it's an extremely tangible example of a way to segment kind of your focus. And I think that honestly, like, I'm going through this right now where I have all these conversations started, right? But you said 5%. I would say 3%. I think we're in the same ballpark. You're 3% or you're 5% of who's ready right now. It really is a matter of focus, because you're going like, zoning in on that to progress it because it's a hot lead or whatever, hot account. And you need to progress that because they've shown you in some way that they're interested. And now is the time to take action on that. So in many ways, it becomes relentless focus, but it's also being relentless about qualification, because you need to be spending this time with these people. You're not over there spending time with the 30% of people that you're really kind of hurt about, that are never going to buy for you. Like, forget about this moment. They're just never going to buy for you. And that's a common thing. I noticed it myself when I was first trying to sell. Like, you try to be this broad approach, wide approach, trying to do all things to all people. And it doesn't work. You need to be relentless about qualification, really think in this like micro level here in this bucketed view, and then, focus on the people right now. Everyone else, you're trying to get into that bucket. And I really like that approach that you had.
Thanks. I wanted to follow up because I think it blends nicely, kind of moving into the tactical stuff. Where I think that the 4 outbound funnels is pretty tactical. I was thinking purely I was in that example, I was talking specifically about like a single threaded kind of follow up engagement or follow up. Talk to me about, you mentioned multi-threading earlier. Why don't you talk? Can you tell us what multi-threading is in your context here? And then I'm assuming we're not talking about CPU cores.
Yeah, exactly. So multi-threading, I am working a couple of deals right now, and one of them smiled at me and was like, "You're multi-threading your champion, and I'm going to be your champion." And I was like, "We are speaking the same lingo."
Sales nerds. Oh man.
Sales nerd. There's a special breed of
on
us.
a t-shirt. That's your new t-shirt.
You'd see me in the airport a mile away. But we joke about it, but it is so powerful. Like, there's multi-threading, and then there's multi-threading your champion, which is a little bit more specific. So multi-threading is like not single thread, is like focusing on one person, persona, etc. within a company. Multi-threading is multiple different like people within that organization. And so recently someone told me no, and an organization, they didn't say no, they were showing signs that they were gonna say no, and I was like, we need to go back. I'm not multi-threaded enough here. And I thought that this person was going to take it further than this person actually was going to. So I reached out to like 5 more people at the company. Now that might be a little bit overboard, but I'm early stage. So it's maybe more risk than like a more well-known company. Technically we're still in stealth mode. So so the multi-threading is even more important for me to start. Then what you start doing is you start building the case within the company, and you have many different eyes on it, and then the probability like increases like when you do that. So I use follow-ups actually to help me multi-thread. And the goal with multi-threading is getting more eyes on it, more attention, building the case for it. And then the idea is hopefully you hit this like critical mass where in the organization, they become much more willing to adopt and use your tool, right? And B2B, I think we've definitely taken this approach to being like more account focused, and this multi-threading approach fits really well with that, because ultimately you need to convert that account. Multi-threading is one way for you to do that. So with the follow-up approach, I'm talking to someone in the organization, just honestly, like simply I spoke to, or some sort of like reference point that you can go back to, oftentimes is like a good enough to get you that sort of warm introduction for yourself. That was a major key to my cold calling. Hey, Collin, I spoke to Michael. He said that you would be the best person to talk to. Do you have a couple minutes? That was like my standard line as an SDR. Now I still do much of that, mostly over LinkedIn and emails today. I'm not really cold calling, but the follow-up kind of mentality of, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the whole idea with this is getting people to warm up to you, so they know who you are, they know what you're about, and when they're in market and ready to buy, that you're the one that they choose.
One thing that I think as an AE that I struggled with when I was first trying to figure out multi-threading was, I felt like there's this pressure, social pressure that you have with the prospect. They're giving you some of their time. They're in a position of power. And I didn't want to offend them by going to somebody else, trying to go around them. How do you think about that when you think about multi-threading? And like, do you think prospects are going to get offended? Have you ever seen that? Or was Collin from 2010 just chicken?
No, I think those thoughts have gone through my mind. I had another account kind of at the end of the call. I was like, what's the probability of, you think moving forward? I felt like I didn't have a good read, so I needed to quantify that, and it validated my fears. He said 25%. And I was like, whoa, I thought at least we were at 40, right? And that's major, like, bad signal if you get to the end of the call and someone says that to you. So I said, okay, I need to go back to this was an SVP. So I said, I need to go back to the drawing board. And then I just start multi-threading like crazy, right? The thing is if someone is at 25%, they are not with you. So you're probably going to lose the deal already. And so for me, you still think about these things, even though I've built sales teams and things like that, there's still very human thoughts go through your head. And so for me, it's like the deal is kind of already lost. So that, I think that kind of helps me get over that. But also, like, more than that, building the case for that person. And now actually we're in a place where it looks like the tide is turning. And it actually looks like this person might say yes, which is insane because they told me 25% chance originally. And I think that they were being true to their word, but through really intentional outreach in a multi-threaded way, I kind of built this case internally where, going back to what you said about individual contributors, okay, are there two people I could get involved? Will they ping their managers? Boom, I booked meetings with both of the managers, right? Got them on board. Maybe RevOps could be a blocker. Need to get them on your side, right? So maybe it's a lot more energy for me because we're again, like, earlier, but I think sometimes, like, people give up too early, right? And I think that they don't take it further. Like, they hear the no and they're like, okay. Yeah, exactly. I think I read the Challenger sale when I was an SDR, and it was really helpful to me as an SDR because of this confidence thing. But I don't think that every person in the world needs to be challenged. Personally, I know people really love the book. I love the book too, but I just don't think that everyone needs to be challenged. But I do think that we need more drivers of revenue and sales. And if you think of yourself like, I have to be the one to make things happen, and they're not going to happen on their own, that's the main job of a salesperson, is nothing happens unless you get that sale. And so just starting with a fundamental mindset of, like, I'm a driver. That's what I do. That's my job. I get things done. And that really helps me get in the right mindset of, like, making things happen. And if somebody says 25%, I could turn away and cry and go home and all those things. But, like, at the end of the day, this person had the problem. They absolutely had the problem that I could solve. And if you know that you're solving a problem that will actually help them, yes, you can take it further. It's when products aren't aligned with people's problems that then you should feel angst. You should feel that, oh, should I stop? But if my partner always says, like, it's activation energy, right? Like, it's like in science, that's what they call it. When something needs to happen, it takes an enormous amount of energy. And when you're converting someone to be a customer or to do more business with you, that is, I can't think of anything that requires more activation energy than that.
Maybe rockets, but it's a close, if it's a close second.
Close second.
I think we maybe bled into the, like, AE conversation just a little bit. I'm curious your thoughts on, like, how do we, if an SDR is listening and they're like, okay, well, you have all this context because you're in the deal. I know not all SDRs are going to listen in on the discovery call, and even fewer of them are going to follow along the whole deal. Maybe enterprise focused, they might be doing this, and they might be tasked with multi-threading. What are your thoughts on, like, maybe a more like mid-sized deal, not founder-led sales, but for an SDR? What's your prospect or your thoughts on multi-threading, where you've had a conversation with somebody there, you believe that there is pain, now you just need to supply the activation energy. How do you do this multi-threading without feeling like you're going around this, trying to run around this person? Or do you just say, fuck it, I'm just gonna go around this person anyway because they've already kind of given me the meh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. One, I think that SDRs should listen to at least some of those calls. To the comment, I agree. Like, the context is a little bit different if I'm doing both of the prospecting and the closing. Totally get that. I do think SDRs, it does benefit them and help them with these follow-ups when they listen to those types of calls. I think I think there's a couple of things to think about here. One, you have multi-threading, you also have multi-channeling, which I want to come back to in a second. So with the multi like threading piece, if someone is like, no, not interested, right now, that could just mean that like I had a bad day and maybe that's what that means. Maybe that doesn't mean that they can't use you. So again, this goes back to figuring out why and not giving up. Like, so if you're like, no, I can't use you because there's a specific tech integration that I need that you absolutely cannot do. And there's no way in hell you're going to be able to do it. Okay. Like you've got it. That's a no. And it's in that 30% bucket that's never going to buy from you until you fix that product. Right. So move on to focus on the deals that you can, but a lot of times we never get quite crystal clear. So in this case, or maybe it's a director level person that's like a no, right? Maybe you go to an individual contributor, and that's a really great way to find more information, right? So then maybe you talk to that individual contributor, and it doesn't have to be, again, about getting that sale. Maybe it's about getting like more information out of that person. But I've also done that with people above them. I've done that with a CRO where where I've gone way above as an SDR, not necessarily just like founder-led sales, but like, so multi-threading doesn't mean just like always going below them. It means going to a different person in a different place and figuring that out. And it's not all centered around this narrative of will you buy right now? Will you buy right now? Sometimes, again, like we said earlier, it's furthering that information so that you can start to build that case within the organization. And so I don't like I said, if you come back to that, they have a problem and we can solve it. Multi-threading is your best friend. And then the other best friend of yours is multi-channeling, which is standing out on different channels, right? I think I had 10 cold calls today to my cell phone. Not one person left a voicemail, right? Like I didn't remember any of those calls. It was wasted time for the people. Like at least get me on your radar of like what you do or who you are or what your name is or something. Out of the 10 cold calls, I never get voicemails, right? The cold emails that are really clear that we're like in a cadence, like it's really tough, not only do you have email delivery working against you, but then if it's just so in my cadence and no like human level follow-up on some other channel to show me, whether it's LinkedIn or video or bumping into me at an event, like scheduling a meeting for us at some conference. Like I've seen all sorts of creative approaches here, but like write down like what are those different ways you can reach out to someone. One person stood out to me because at one point, I don't know if I still do, but it said I like cooking and they sent me like a Spanish cookbook. That's gonna stand out to me in terms of like a gifting, right? They didn't send me socks or something like that. It was like really contextual to the moment. Yeah. So I think these multi-threading is married to multi-channeling, and yes, it's tough, but it goes back to this: what are we? We're drivers. We make things happen.
I love that. I don't want to pull us back into multi-threading too much, but if you're curious we had a conversation with Phil Keen on his top-down, bottoms-up process, where he basically did very similar things to what you described. He would email the CEO or email the top and then try and get a referral down. And if he couldn't get that, then he'd also do the bottoms up, where he would start cold calling. Say you're going after the VP of sales, he would call all the SDRs and the AEs to try and uncover if there was pain. And then he would kind of do a survey across the team. And then he would take that and say, repackage that as something new to take to the VP of sales. And say,
exactly.
Hey, I surveyed 5 of your AEs and 2 of your BDRs. And they said this, and this, and then it's a lot of work to get to that one. And so, this is a tactic that's only worth using in certain circumstances, but he would take that and like, now you've got something to go to the VP of sales with.
Exactly. The only thing that I would say that I would add to it is it has to also not feel like a gotcha moment, because a lot of times when people are multi-threading, they're doing it in this fact-finding way. And it's, it happened to me the other day, and it didn't feel good as a buying experience. And in fact, I went to G2 and I was like, alternatives to, because the sales experience matters more than ever. And we can't forget that as it becomes easier and easier to create bespoke products, right? Spin up marketing teams and things like that. The sales experience is really mattering more than ever. So we want to do these things, but also in a way where we don't make them feel like quite like that gotcha moment, but rather I really want to be the one that helps you solve this problem.
Mhm. I love that, because how poorly of a way to convince somebody to take a meeting than to be like, hey, look, you were wrong.
Yeah,
It's like,
literally.
this is never going to go well.
It happened to me the other day. I couldn't believe it.
No way.
Yeah.
Uh, so we talked about multi-threading. We talked about multi-channel.
Mhm.
What are some other tactics that you like as that you would teach to a new SDR that's working on? Yeah, I'm just doing my, my outreach follow-ups, or I'm just doing my LinkedIn follow-ups, or I'm working my next actions. What are some other tactics
Yeah.
that you would cover with them?
Yeah, I do think it isn't, you mentioned LinkedIn. I do think it is important to have like some sort of like presence. I don't want to belabor this point, but one of the things that we did at Chili Piper that I think was critical to our growth was developing like and viewing like the lines between sales and marketing are getting arguably more blurred than ever. And how can you like leverage that with your SDRs? Like, it's okay. Like sometimes when I talk to SDRs about personal branding, they say, well, like I haven't gotten to that level in my career yet. And it's like, okay, well, there's nothing preventing you from sharing like your experience, that's just as valid. And interesting, quite frankly. I saw a post the other day from an SDR that had 5,000 likes, and it was like, I think it was about the permission based like openers, like where you, you say, am
Don't
I
catch it at a
gonna,
bad time.
yeah,
Kind of
exactly.
2 minutes of your
So
time or something like that.
yeah. And I think he was saying, like, do you want to give me a shot or hang up on me? That sort of like giving two options there. And it had like 5,000 likes. Now, I'm not even saying that that should be the goal, but like, what are people saying, and where do they live? First of all, where do your buyers live? Can you
Mhm.
engage in them in some capacity? Can you learn from them and also share like your learnings? And I think like this doesn't need to be like an intense thing. Like, you know how sometimes when people have call reluctance, it can manifest itself in unforeseen ways. You spend all day researching or something like that instead of
Mhm.
actually like reaching out. I can see that dynamic unfold sometimes with personal branding. And so it should be like we pay some attention to it, but it's not necessarily like all of our focus. And then, especially if you're selling to sales leaders, like I think, where are your buyers? That should be where you spend time, and definitely invest in your brand. Brand is an extension of the sales experience. It's an extension of this follow-up experience too. Somebody followed up with me recently because they saw a post of mine, right? I don't spend hardly that much time on LinkedIn anymore, being that I was working on starting a business and writing a book. And now I'm starting to spend a few minutes a day on there, and I have figured out a way for it to pay off with a minimal amount of time that I deploy to it. So there's other things that are extensions of this follow-up process. Like how can I maybe get some of this come inbound to me where the message is in their inbox, but I figure out how to get them to reply to it, not because of the message, but because maybe they saw a post that I did as well. So that's something I've been leveraging more this year as well. But again, like something I think that also applies to SDRs that I talk to. And I think it's okay to share like your learnings, your experience. And I think that that's perfectly fine as well.
I mean, I think especially if you're selling in the sales space, but even like, I mean, I sold diesel generators back in the day, and I think if I was going right now, I'd probably start. I did learn a ton of stuff that, is I'm not sure. You know what? My buyers would have found interesting, because the people I was selling to generally didn't understand how to size a load for a diesel generator and like all the intricacies. And so you do end up becoming experts in this really strange niche of a product
Yep.
category. And you're typically not selling to other experts. Like I wasn't selling to other people that were like diesel generator experts. I was selling to people that, just needed power in a place that didn't have power lines.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think if I could post about diesel generators, I'm not going to, but if I could do that, and I think that would be valuable, I suspect whatever you're selling, if you're listening, is probably a whole lot more relevant. I bet you there are a lot more people looking on LinkedIn for content around that than they are how to size a diesel generator.
Yeah, exactly. And just spend some time there, not necessarily like a lot of time there. And it will benefit you in other ways too. It'll help your own career. You take your personal brand like with you, right? It's an extension of your reputation. And it is essential when you become a sales leader. So it's good to get some of those learnings in like earlier. And also you own your personal brand like the company doesn't. So I always encourage people to talk about that. Something else with follow-ups that I just thought of actually that has helped with SDRs and AEs, and I wish that people leverage it more with me, and it's like really simple, is this idea of like, I think sometimes we like get behind email, and I'm hearing like right now people having a tougher time with email than maybe they did in the past, and maybe more success with calls. That's just a survey of one. That's what I'm hearing right now. Maybe a year ago, I heard the opposite. Regardless, though, one tactic that's always served me well is if something is happening over email, I ask for a 5-minute call. And it's so simple, but I've saved deals this way. I have accelerated deals. I have gotten someone who said that they didn't have time. I just asked for that 5-minute call, and it seems so reasonable that people are willing to do it. Like, hey, provide a reason. Can we hop on a 5-minute call? And then you figure out really quickly which bucket they're in, to your point earlier about like kind of sorting them. That has been like a really, really, really powerful tool for my own prospecting and follow-ups. Hey, totally get you're super busy. Can we hop on a quick 5-minute call? And it's been very helpful.
Nice. A 5-minute call. Hey, getting really, really short.
Really short. Because like, even if it's like sometimes with negotiating a deal, like it could get confusing over email, that follow-up then is a 5-minute call. Granted, that's a little bit more AE, but the concept is like really similar for SDR is like, it's a multi-channeling essentially, but in a really specific way. Like everyone's hiding behind email a little bit. And if you can get them to talk to you on the physical cell phone, right? Yeah, I think sometimes we forget, what a powerful tool the phone can be. And that's not a cold call even. That's like a warm call. And they're giving you their cell phone. Now they can text you, like open that door and see what happens. Like I don't see people leveraging things like that nearly a lot. Everyone just wants to mass blast and cadence. And I think there's like all these little details that add up to, higher conversion rates for SDRs if we just pay a little bit more attention to them.
Love that. So if you're an SDR and you're going back and forth with a prospect and they're asking questions and they're like, oh, well, how, does it come in blue? Maybe not quite a high intent question like that, but maybe something like, yeah, I don't know. I won't make up an example, but does it come in blue? And say like, instead of replying back with like the data sheet of like, these are all the blues we offer, like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I can just talk to you about like what kind of blue you're looking for. Cause like yes and no. And I just want to, remove a lot of the back and forth. Could I give you a call for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And like, so would you send that email and then just call them, or would you wait till they get back? I mean, assuming you've got their cell phone number.
Yeah. Usually like in that type of situation, I've had success with just sending the email and then being like, yeah, let's talk. And then if I don't hear back within a reasonable time, then trying the call. And that has worked really well. Follow-ups come in other forms with that too. Like if they're opening your email a bunch and just like haven't replied, like pick up the phone and call them. That's like a fantastic place to do like a follow-up activity is when they're already engaging in some capacity. Like I just got off the phone earlier today where someone's like, they're clicking the links and they're downloading and they're doing this and they're doing that. And you can see that to me, that's the power, is not actually the mass blasting, but the task management and the focus and actually the telling you what they're actually doing with it. I still think we have, with a lot of the tools, have room for improvement on whether replies are positive or negative, but that's a story for a different day. But if they're opening emails, right, and engaging with it, that is another perfect time to pick up the phone. But like we have to find these opportunities to engage on different channels. Like, when do I leave that voicemail? When do I send that LinkedIn like message? And again, like the goal a lot of times is engagement. You know, maybe I've had someone send me a piece of information I didn't know, you know, that is hugely valuable, right? Or they helped me with a project that I was working on, and then, oh, now I'm in market for like your tool. And you know, it can be this simple as, you know, you are having many ongoing conversations with people, and it doesn't always have to be about that 3 or 5% that are trying to buy like in this exact moment.
Totally. I think one of my favorite experiments that we ran with our Outbound Labs program was the soft ask versus a direct ask. And the soft ask had triple the
Wow.
the number of positive replies in it.
Did you publish that?
Correctly. Yeah, I think it's on the
Wow.
YouTube channel.
That's really powerful.
I feel like I might have the stat wrong. It was pre-pandemic, so it feels like 8 years ago, but it probably was like 4. It's on our YouTube channel. I'll get our people to track it down and throw it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Outbound Labs, soft ask.
Yeah.
And it outperformed the, hey, can I get a meeting? And the context was of the messaging. No, because we ran this across a number of different clients at scale over LinkedIn. And the approach on the one side, on the hard ask, was your standard, like, hey, we do X, Y, and Z, you know, would like to see if, you know, do you have 10 minutes for a quick call? The other was, hey, I noticed you're in this industry, or you're in this kind of job role, and we have this interesting research. Does that sound like something to be relevant to you? And so it was offering it wasn't just copy pasting and sharing it. It was like, hey, we have this research. Would you like to see it? And then they're like, yeah. And so you send them this report or send them this piece of content that's helpful. And they're like, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about what X does. And I think it created a whole lot more conversations.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm finding that the soft like CTA is always been like much better. The 15-minute thing has been around forever, and it is off-putting to me because I've seen it so many times. But same thing with the tiger thing or the elephant or whatever, the crocodile, like, right? Like, it's some of those things have just circled around so many times. Or like another pet peeve of mine is like when I get like banted. It's just one of those things you've just seen so many times, like budget authority, need, timeline. And it is, I think, you know, part of the soft CTA thing as well is creativity, which is what you're saying with the recipe, is what we were saying with the cooking book. It's this element of like it's okay to have fun. It's okay to like be creative. It's okay to send someone something hyper contextual to the moment, right? Like, I was trying to do a follow-up one time and a guy wouldn't talk to me. He said, I'm too busy to talk to you. And I said, here's a $30 Groupon, or not Groupon, excuse me, Grubhub. Here's a $30 Grubhub. I bought you dinner tonight, you know, nothing insane, Chipotle or whatever. And I bought this time from you. And he said, okay. Right. So it's just like, if I went and did the whole like same exact follow-up thing that everyone else is doing, like, we're fighting for the people's attention here, and fighting for people's attention with the same like super logical, super boring like messaging is really tough. But the more that we can harness creativity, the better off like we are. Like, send those emails with the Justin Bieber. I remember we were talking about Kevin earlier when we were at Stagnation. We used to have competitions with who can send like the most creative, and someone took like a Justin Bieber song and translated it to like the buyer and their relationship, and it was hilarious. And like I was crying laughing so hard. And we used to do all these things, and I don't get emails like this anymore. Like, I don't know, like, are we tired? Like, what's going on? We need this creativity back. And I don't think, you know, people, PLG, all these other movements out there, we're not going to get rid of SDRs. We're not going to get rid of them. What we do need is a better experience with them. And creativity is the way to do that. It's not a million canned emails and things like that. It's leveraging creativity to, you know, do things we haven't done before in order to have these emotional experiences that are really favorable. They're buyer centric. They're helping the buyer solve their problem. They're all these things. But like, I always think back to that Justin Bieber competition, right? Like you should go do a spiff tomorrow for that. Like who could send the most creative like emails. And then the argument, we should consider that, which is you spend all the time on the personalized email and then no one replies. And I think that's where a tiering system comes into play. And you say like this type of messaging goes to this account. Maybe you do a little bit more something different for your tier 3s than your tier 1s.
Totally. And I think if you are going to, just to kind of close the loop on the process and making it a system instead of just like a playbook that lives in a binder on your desk, if people still have printers, the thing that you can do is, or the thing that's really helpful is if you're going to be creative, making sure that while you're in that creativity mode, if you're doing good work, that you're referencing it later on. You don't just do this thing once, and send this really cool email and then go back to your standard follow-up. Like I think comedians call it like a callback to like a previous joke. You can use that in your, if you open with something creative as your first email, you can call back to that in your third email. So that you don't lose this context. And this way you're approaching each contact, each account as, like you said earlier, you're building, as opposed to just sorting through the phone book and going, okay, I called this person, check. You're building. Every time you're adding a little bit. And so eventually these like tiny little mounds of sand are going to turn into Great Barrier Reef. I've got a huge account for you.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit different direction, but it reminded me of like I have my own follow-ups, but I also used to like really zone in on where other people messed up with their own follow-ups. And like you mentioned, closed lost opportunities. That was like my favorite place to live, because they engaged with you before and there was like something just like that needed to be changed or corrected. And a lot of people, that was a classic spot where people would lose diligence or not focus. And so thinking like where other people close lost opportunities are one way, but there's many ways you could do this. But what happened before that needs to be corrected? And again, going back to prioritization and creating a system for it. We had like a SLA where like after 3 months you could prospect someone else's closed lost opportunities, and I would just create a report and then do that. And there was so much revenue I generated from doing that. Like boom, correct whatever the thing was, like even at a follow-up level, like people, there was a wrong number and they just wouldn't put the right number in, or website or something like that. Like when the people who put in that extra level of detailed work always and didn't give up, they all and were creative, like they just rose to the top all the time. But of course, like no one wants to hear doing work is the answer.
I love the like, I'm picturing you just laughing maniacally, building an important sales laugh. Like if the close reason is close lost nurture and date range equals 91 days to 180 days, run report, laugh maniacally, close a bunch of somebody else's business that they worked so hard on and then gave up. Like it's a genius move. It is honestly amazing. And if you're an SDR, like, or an AE, like go and run that report. If nobody tells you not to, go and run that report.
Like don't break any rules, do it within your operating system, but of course take it to the level that other people aren't willing to go.
Because most people don't do that. And don't be afraid to, like Michael said earlier, to multi-thread and multi-channel.
So
just because your AE closed lost nurtured the director of sales doesn't mean you can't go after the VP or the CRO or yada yada.
And these people leave, right? Like what's the statistic these days? 12 months. When I was at Chili Piper a year and a half ago, it was 18 months, the average tenure of a VP of sales. Who knows what it is? Like you hear these statistics all the time, but the point being is like people don't necessarily stay in jobs very long in SaaS, like as a stereotype. So, that factors in. Like you get a new actor in an organization. If it's the right new actor, things start moving where they were stale before. Right. This is where those follow-ups and all these ongoing conversations. So you can't give up.
And I'd say from the CEO seat, almost every executive I've hired has come in and wanted to rip and replace a tech stack of some sort.
the people have deep opinions on these things too. And it's often very experiential, right? They had an experience with one tool, somebody wined and dined them. I was just talking to someone earlier today where the VP really loves one tool because it's like, oh, they take me to dinner, they make me feel like a thought leader, things like that. So then it gets complicated because you have to take these things into consideration as well.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I could ask you questions about follow-ups and SDR all day long, but I recognize we've been going for about an hour plus, and I wanted to land this just with a, stepping down from the episode, unless there's anything on follow-ups that you wanted to add or that we didn't cover.
No, I think that covers it for me.
Love it. Michael, you're somebody who's got multiple things going on. You've been a sales development leader. You wrote a book. You've got a startup going on. Let's talk about the book first, and then I've got an interesting idea for the startup. So the book,
Okay.
Tell me about this book that you're writing.
Yeah.
Have written by now. And
yeah,
is coming
it's
out.
an editing process, which is crazy. So yeah, it was, I've always wanted to write one, but to be kind of where we are is a really exciting place. So the title of the book is Crafting the Sale: How to Create a Sales Experience That Drives Revenue, Impresses Buyers, and Transforms Your Sales Career. It's coming out later on this year, so around September. Is basically like a capstone project of working as a sales leader, and highlighted kind of like all my learnings from both a sales rep and a sales leader. Basically, like when I was new to sales, like over a decade ago, I felt like a lot of the books weren't like really approachable or like engaging for me, so it made it like really hard to learn. Almost like one of them in particular, I'm not going to say any names, like felt like reading a vacuum cleaner manual. So like I didn't want a book like that for, I wanted something like engaging, like interacting. So the structure of the book is like every chapter starts with a story, then you have like really clear concepts in each chapter, and then at the end of every chapter are quick like takeaways that you could try out in the form of like a try this. So in some ways I wrote the book to like 22-year-old Michael Tuso, who is like trying to like learn about sales and, pick up on concepts that are really digestible. So that's how I wrote the book. And then the what part of the book is like, I really just think that the sales experience, the SDR, the AE, the account manager, especially, is mattering more than it ever has before. And I don't think it's going, anywhere. I just think that we're getting to we're getting to this place of like, people are studying sales, it's in colleges and universities and things like that. And it's becoming this like really well-worn discipline, which I think is like a good thing. In some ways it's getting harder. In some ways, I think it's forcing us all to learn in different ways. And I think that's a good thing. But the book is about how do you craft a sale and create a really customer-centric, problem-solving, buyer-centric sales experience. So that's what the book is about.
I love it. I can't wait for it to come out. We'll have you back on the show when the book is coming out.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to stay in touch, you can follow Michael on LinkedIn. I'll throw a link to his LinkedIn profile in the show notes, along with other things.
Yeah.
I want to close with one last thing, because I know you got a software startup on the side. We try not to do too much promo on the show. And so I thought an interesting way, and I haven't talked to Michael about this, so we can edit it out after if it doesn't go well, but a perfectly on-brand way to end the episode. Can you write a follow-up email to me as if you and I have had a conversation already about Calypso?
Yeah.
But I was interested for my account execs. Let's say I have a team of account executives, but we're using Salesforce and Outreach already. And so we had gone through the conversation. I said, yeah, it sounds interesting. I like it. We're working accounts, we're working big customers. So there is some pain there. We use Salesforce, we use Outreach, or actually now we use Apollo. Now tell me, how would you write that follow-up email? I'll give you a minute to think.
Okay. So let me make sure I have this right. So you're using Salesforce, and then you're using Outreach, or did you say Apollo?
Apollo now. It was Outreach, but now Apollo.
Okay. And then you said you have some pain. Do I know what this pain is?
You can assume there's some. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't want to give too much away about what I know about or don't know about Calypso. So
Okay, so focus on expansion sales is what we do. So like the account management and expansion sales. Okay, and then you have recently switched to Apollo, and you're like kind of lukewarm.
We had a discovery call, and I was like, yeah, not really interested right now. And now you're trying to reactivate me and get me interested.
Okay.
I'm taking another call. Okay, and we're back. So we've got the follow-up email that I made Michael literally right on the spot here.
It was fun.
He wrote it down in pen first, and then couldn't read his writing, so I had to write it again.
I don't have good handwriting, Collin.
So Calypso.
Follow-up. Here we go. Hey, Collin, I know when we chatted back in September, Calypso didn't make the most sense because you all were switching to Apollo. Now that we're a bit past the date you all mentioned for the rollout, was hoping to talk through how Calypso works specifically with Apollo in the context of account mapping and expansion identification. That seemed most important to you at the time. Would be great to give an update from our end and show you the changes if you're up for it. What do you say?
100% yes.
Would you say yes to that, or would you be like, don't talk to me?
I know. I think I would. I mean, I have struggled with account mapping in Salesforce before, and so as a real pain for sure. If you want to talk to my AE team of my small A team, then yeah, happy to have a chat. But I think if I had an especially large AE team, or even a couple AEs with a complex workflow, I might even introduce you to one guy I talked to. I was doing a bunch of customer development. I mean, I think we talked back earlier this year, and one guy said he was having his SDRs do VLOOKUPs in Excel because their account mapping rules were so complex.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense. Maybe they could teach me something. I mean, I don't necessarily want to learn how to do a VLOOKUP, but it would be interested to see like why it's so complex.
Yeah. I think it's their Salesforce and their anyway, not important for the podcast, but happy to chat about it afterwards.
Yeah.
If you haven't picked up on it, Calypso is Michael's startup, Calypso, CALLYPSO.co. And if you're an AE selling to accounts, this might be a tool you want to have a look at. So if you need to do account mapping or white space planning or anything like that, or account mapping, account planning, something I always found really challenging to do in Salesforce. And I always would pull out to an Excel or to something else. Yeah. It was a little bit clunkier.
Yeah. Is anything with expansion sales and renewals as it pertains to revenue. So really focus on that piece. So like I said, we're early and excited to chat with anyone who cares about those things.
Love it. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming back on the show for a third time. We look forward to having you back in September, October, when that book is coming back out. If anybody wants to reach Michael, I'll throw a link to his LinkedIn in the show notes, as well as a link to Calypso and future book links and all that. So, Michael, thanks again for coming on.
So great being here. Thanks for having me a third time.